Hello everyone. How is everybody? And here we are, live once again. Let's have a beer. I'm gonna start with the Maudit, or the beer of the damned, basically. So I'm having a beer of the damned, and here we go. Welcome aboard, everybody. And it's nice to have everybody here to talk about what's above 30 megahertz. It'll be a shorter show than usual. I have a little event later on. So we're probably not going to do 3 hours today. I have to meet some people later, but of course we want to do the show anyways, because you guys we do this only once a month, so you know it's one of those shows that doesn't happen very often. So hey everybody, welcome. This is the VHF UHF, or 30 megahertz and above show. This is a show where we talk about scanner radio, police scanners, the world of VHF, UHF, SHF, whatever is above 30 megahertz. I still have one receiver here on shortwave, the Yaesu FD450. So if we have something interesting or unusual you guys are hearing, we'll check it out here. But we're mainly concentrating on the world above 30 megahertz. And we got some questions, a few questions that I want to answer and talk about, and hope that everybody will enjoy. My name is Gilles. I'm located in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, and we have this show on the last Saturday of each month. So if you remember that the last Saturday of each month is VHF UHF, pretty much that's pretty much where we are. So yesterday there was a shortwave radio show, of course, for those that wonder, and we had a lot of fun with that. I hope everybody enjoyed. And we're here to entertain and have fun. There's a beautiful chat room, of course, for everybody that wants to join in, with amazing people that will have answers, hopefully, to your question. If I don't have them, they have them. We don't, together we know a lot of stuff, but we each have our, our parts of what we understand and know well, parts of the hobby that we totally know about, and some parts where we're not as knowledgeable, and there are people that are knowledgeable. So a lot of help also at the same time. Hope everybody enjoys the show today. In the chat we have Nick Amendo from Romania. Welcome aboard. JD Williamson, sorry that you can't make it for the night shift weekend, unfortunately. Hopefully next time around. Radioactive, nice to have you on board. Bobby Burgess, nice to have you here from Louisiana, USA. Matambale is in Colorado, nice to have you here. Rough Duff McLeod, nice to have you on board. Pretty cool to have you here. We have anybody else? Let's see. The SAS Lift, nice to have you here. German police uses Tetra, he says, encrypted. Nice to have you on board. What else do we have? Rough McLeod says P25 and encryption now used in this part of Nova Scotia. Here, the Montreal police is on P25 encrypted also. It's impossible to listen to anything, unfortunately. Bonjour et bienvenue, PLF Radio. Toujours un plaisir de vous avoir parmi nous. Nice to have you here from France. Jerry DX, nice to have you on board, my friend. NL13851 from the Netherlands, nice to have you on board. Elton Byington, nice to have you here. K3 JWA in Baltimore. Wow, Snapple, I haven't had Snapple in a million years. I'm not even sure. It was popular once here in it was everywhere. For some reason I don't see it anywhere. I don't know if it's just been removed in Canada or something, or it's just not as popular as they hoped that it would be, or something like that. Mike Hanna, nice to have you here. Always a pleasure to have you here. And I hope so radioactive that everybody has fun joining in. Absolutely. So it's pretty cool. Hey Mick, nice to have you on board. Nice to have you here. Unpopcom, nice to have you on board from Central Pennsylvania. Vaults from Latvia, nice to have you here. Terry Cook from Missoula, Montana, nice to have you here. Pretty cool. And Max Headstrong, nice to have you on board. Eddie Essex checking in, nice to have you here. And yeah, that's same here. I haven't heard about Snapple in ages. I'm not even sure we have that. I can't recall going to a grocery or a store and seeing any of that. It was kind of a popular thing in the 90s or something. It's as if it had like a popularity moment and then it disappeared or something. So, anyways, Radioactive says Snapple is still big in Oregon. So, interesting. I'll have to check that out when I go out to the grocery or to the store, see if they still have some of that. Page Master, nice to have you on board from Moore, Oklahoma. Pretty cool. Cherry DX is listening to the 2-meter band on the SDR play. Pretty good reception. I was checking out something on the SDR, the RSB1A, because there's a, and we're going to talk about it because some people are mentioning that and asking questions. There's a beacon in La Chute, Quebec, that I usually can receive on my ICOM, and it's at 144.278 CW beacon on a 2-meter band. And it's not very strong, but I hear it on my ICOM, and I've been unable to tune it on the RSB1A. And if I guess there would be a difference between my $2,000 ICOM receiver and the RSB1A, that's where it would be, I guess. The ability to get that really, really weak signal that the RSB1A doesn't quite get. So there seems to be some kind of a slight difference. Not a big one, because I mean I listen to satellites on it and all, but there seems to be a slight difference in sensitivity. It's not as sensitive as the ICOM is, but it's pretty good, actually, pretty good. So Page Master says meow, DX Ball. Hey, let's just show Paul a little bit because he's a mascot of the shows. So hey everybody, look here, yeah, people want to see you, man. So I'm listening actually to some airport communications here, 134.650. So anyways, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about beacons. I have questions about beacons. Some people say, well, you know, there's HF beacons on the shortwave bands. Is there something equivalent in the VHF UHF range? And yes, absolutely. The amateur bands are full of beacons in the VHF UHF range. There's actually a page dedicated to that. And so these are aero communications that you guys are hearing in the background there. So we'll be checking that out. Yeah, that's beer. So Paul saying hello to everybody. Well, I forgot to remove the autofocus, which is always annoying. So anyways, we'll have a lot of fun, and we'll talk about that. There's definitely a lot of stuff happening to talk about on the VHF UHF range. What else do we have?
Yes, sir. 2000 on the heading. Hotel November.
Mad Radio DXer, nice to have you here. Pretty cool. Radioactive, listening to a barn on fire in the town to the west of him. Fastlow, nice to have you here. Yeah, 7200 is a cuckoo's nest of stupid AMs that just are there all day long ranting. It's like 14313 upper sideband, same kind of communications. So Radioactive is listening to Law and Fire VHF in aircraft communications. PageMaster says for VHF there are non-directional beacons mainly used by FAA for airports. So we'll check all of that. Anthony McDonald, nice to have you here. What kind of beer? I got beer at the Damned. This is my first beer, the Mozit. It's a beer at the Damned. So pretty much that's the first one, 8%. Got 4 beers, but I won't drink 4. It probably will not go much more than 2, as I have to go to a meeting with friends a little later. Mandarin DXer says here in the UK they are aiming to stop hospitals using pagers by 2021. They have described it as old technology, and only one service provider for pagers is left, according to the news. Wow, amazing. Brandon Sexton, nice to have you here. So, no, I'm not. Actually, yesterday I had some strong beers. Just the first one, it was like a 5%. I don't have any 5% anymore. That's why I'm already on the strong beer. Billy Laptop, Asia, can you tell me which audio program you link the SDR Uno to your computer for listening to slow scan TV on the ISS? So I don't use any program, Billy Laptop. I actually, on this computer, use the stereo mix capability of the sound card that's integrated into the machine. So some Windows machine have, depending on the sound card you use, will have already stereo mix capability, which is kind of a virtual way of routing the audio within the computer, so you can actually decode signals. That's what I do here. But if you don't have that capability, you can use what is it? It's a virtual something like virtual cable or virtual. What's the name of the software? There's one that you can install that actually will create a virtual audio cable within your PC. So you can use that virtual audio cable. Virtual VAC, virtual audio cable. So virtual audio cable will actually route the audio internally without having to, do anything special, but just install that. So depending on the machine you have, you might have the stereo mix, and that's what I use. And all my computers here actually have stereo mix possibility. So when that is actually activated, the audio is available within your software. You just got to choose stereo mix as a source of audio for the microphone. So that's what's happening here. It's really stereo mix. If you don't see stereo mix in Windows, you got to activate the hidden options. When you right click on the audio section of your computer in Windows, when you see the recording, everything that has to do with recording, you right click and make sure that you activate and see all the hidden devices. And once you do that, you might see the stereo mix that is disabled, that you can actually enable to have it working. So apart from that, you use virtual audio cable that you install in your PC, and that will route the audio, and you'll be able to use it also in that way. Mandarin DXer, Gilles, which frequency are pagers on for Canada? Is there a national service provider? Here is around 153 megahertz. There are quite a few frequencies, but they're all pretty much all the pager system here in Canada, at least here around Montreal, is in the 150 megahertz range. There's several scattered across I'd say about from 148 megahertz, just above the 2 meter band, all the way to 160 megahertz. In there's a few. I believe there's a few pagers around the top of the VHF band also, 167, 68 megahertz. I don't think there's anything more than that I don't know if there's pagers on the UHF range. I don't think so. I don't know actually. But most of what I've heard in pagers are 150 megahertz. There's one pager frequency in the 30 to 50 megahertz range also here. something like 34, 35 megahertz. I believe it's 34 megahertz, 34 dot something. I don't know if it's still active actually, but there's one in the 34 megahertz range, something like that, here also. Andrew Ross, nice to have you on board. Pretty cool to have you here. Says, but especially Paul. Busy this evening, but I'll participate next week as I have some questions. I recently bought a new scanner. Things have changed since the 90s. Absolutely, absolutely. The like shortwave, the world above 30 megahertz is in transition. Some stuff is moving into digital modes. Some stuff is in digital encryption modes. And you know, in the latest survey of I saw an article talking about you know, scanning, when they were scanning the VHF to UHF range. Still, the latest survey will tell you that even though some systems like, you know, law enforcement might have gone digital, the majority of what you hear on the VHF UHF range is still analog, and there's still quite a lot. But it depends what you want to hear. You know, when people tell me, like, you know, they always refer to that guy that I know that went to school with, that was a big fan of listening to the local police in Montreal. The problem is, okay, it's encrypted, but for that person, it ended pretty much his scanning life, his radio life, because for him, that was what he wanted to hear. And it's interesting because he also is showing what a lot of people actually been showing. You know, in the 90s, when there was like the late 80s, early 90s, when there's that craze of scanner radio, what I saw over time was that a lot of people were listening to specific things, had no idea about whatever the rest. And I can bet you that most scanner radios out there that were sold were pretty much all, you know, listening to the police, or fire department, or cell phones, or analog cordless phones. Pretty much everything was in there, and nothing more. And when you remove that, they're like, well, there's nothing to listen to anymore. Well, no, there's a lot more than that. That guy asked me once, because he saw a couple of my videos, and said, I look at what you're listening to, and I'm wondering, you know, now that the police is encrypted, what is there to listen to? And I said, you live in a big city where there's a lot of stuff here. We got the airports. We've got a lot of maritime communications in the VHF range. We've got, there's tons of, you know, all sorts of what I call commercial communications, which is anything from, you know, delivery trucks to whatever companies that, you know, do things around town. There's a lot of analog stuff in the 450, 460 megahertz. A lot of them are trunked. That means that they actually follow specific sets of frequencies. That makes it a little annoying when you don't have a trunk scanner, but it doesn't prevent you from actually listening to the services, especially when it's kind of quiet, you know, in the evening when there's less communications. Very often the trunk system will just keep it on the same frequency all the time. And so it makes it easier. But in the daytime, when there's a lot of stuff, yeah, the trunk system might actually put a lot of communications in different frequencies, and you got to follow through. So that's where a trunk scanner is, of course, kind of useful. But there's a lot of stuff. There's still a lot of stuff to listen to, even when you move on to the world of digital communications. You know, systems like the Whistler TRX1, or the ICOM R30. There's the oh man, what's this? I'm trying to remember. Uniden has a couple of scanners that will actually decode digital modes, P25, stuff like that. And a lot of that is unencrypted. There's a lot of the digital stuff is digital, so you need that radio that can actually tune it. But a lot of it is in the clear, meaning that once you got the radio to listen to P25 or some of these, you know, digital modes, you actually hear the communications in the clear. Not everything is encrypted when you use digital modes. A lot of them actually go on the fact that they use a digital mode, so they lower the amount of people that can listen to. It isn't zero, because there are people out there that have these more advanced scanner radios, of course. So, ManReader DXer says VB Wi-Fi cable is good as well, so cool. Yep, virtual audio cable is free. Absolutely, Vols. iMapper, nice to have you on board from Moscow. Anthony McDonald says, got his Uniden BCD 996P2, but can't figure out how to use the P25 mode. It's something to get used to. A lot of the stuff that you have, that you'll listen to, is got, you know, it's like trunk. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that actually needs certain knowledge. You know, like programming a trunk scanner. Sometimes also same thing. And the manuals are not always well done on these radios. A lot of them have manuals that are kind of crappy. That one of the things you should do, Anthony, is of course go to YouTube and check out your model in P25. It's like almost every radio has someone out there that's going to explain to you in a video, hey, this is how you program and do this. Pretty sure. Walt says, for shorter shows, you should be drinking something stronger than a beer. No, I don't want to be wasted when I go to see my friends tonight. Radioactive says, pager services around 930 megahertz. So, yeah, interesting. And there's a lot of stuff. Yeah, that's true also, as Matambale says. Radio Reference also has a lot of instructions and information on how to program some of these scanners also in these services. So that is something also that you can check out. Radioactive says, I looked into getting pager services on the web and they keep saying that the pagers are secure or private, to which I say it is lol. I read your pagers every day. Yeah, absolutely, it's a joke. There's nothing secure in pagers. Man, I remember using, what was it? POC 32 or something like that, the Windows app that you would just feed the pager tones and it would actually give you all the messages that were going through the pager. Butterbean, nice to have you on board from East Georgia. So, PageMaster says, believe it or not, the term trunk came from when the police officers kept their transceivers in the trunk of their police cars back in the 50s, 60s. That's where it comes from? Oh, really? That's kind of funny. I didn't know where that trunk term came from for the radio communications, actually. Huh, trunk system. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. We've got a little bit of some knowledge here. I'm just gonna lower the volume here of the RSP1. Actually, it said Mirabel. I didn't even know that they were still having planes that were actually getting on or off Mirabel. Probably small planes, I guess. Okay, and we'll be checking also at the same time, some by curiosity, any of the satellites that might be coming over and that we might be able to do something with. We'll be checking that. So let's check out here satellite stuff at the same time. Why not? And Guru Fisher, nice to have you on board. Pretty cool. The SAS says, my beer tonight is Benedictiner. Interesting. Randall Klontz, nice to have you on board from Northeast Illinois. So we will try to get to the software for tracking satellites, as my tablet seems to be frozen. We'll let it go through whatever it has to do. One of the questions that someone was mentioning this week for the show, and he was wondering because he's listening to 30 to 54 megahertz on his scanner radio, and he says he's been wondering what is there to listen to in that range, because he says that he's been, let the scanner go through and through and through and doesn't hear anything. 30 to 54 megahertz depends where you live. There are some stuff like here if I scan 30 to 54, honestly I won't hear that much. There doesn't seem to be a lot going on in that range, but it's an interesting range that you got to remember because it also has interesting capabilities. So in regular times, 30 to 54 will be a line of sight band, so it will be just local communications. But what's interesting is when sporadic E-skip happens, the 30 to 54 megahertz band might actually come alive with tons of signals that are not even close to where you are. They might actually be distant signals, and that's because when sporadic E-skip happens, the ionosphere is actually capable of propagating the signals a little bit like the cat just moved the camera, I believe. Propagating the signals in such a way that it actually is going to propagate thousands of kilometers away through the ionosphere by same phenomena that the HF bands propagate. And that's kind of interesting because when that happens, you might have a local band that's very quiet where you are, but suddenly become alive with tons of signals from far away. And that becomes a very big challenge because you've got to identify, and if you want to try to identify what you're hearing, you'll have to go with all the details that they're actually giving out. Last time this happened for me, that I tuned the 30 to 50 megahertz range in search of signals with sporadic E, was, I believe, last summer in one of the openings where the 6 meter band was up. And I heard a few signals that were definitely with the English style, the English accent used, from the south of the United States probably. And you will hear law enforcement, you will hear all sorts of things, fire departments. There's still, across the United States particularly, a lot of police departments that still use old equipment with 30 megahertz and 40 megahertz frequencies for their police and law enforcement, and for the fire departments and all of that. Still quite a lot of that. What's interesting with that is when sporadic E opens, now you can hear, I remember one year, a long time ago, hearing a police chase. And you got to figure out where is that happening exactly. And you got to rely on, what they're saying, and if they mention streets, and they mention and all the information that they can give you. And, you got to Google this stuff and say, okay, where can that be from? I remember one of their communications that I had in police chase back then, had kind of pinpointed to me that it was happening in Alabama, in the south of the U.S. But it was kind of funny because, you hear this police chase so far away because it's propagating like a shortwave signals, and you had all the things, the fade in and fade outs, like listening to a shortwave broadcast, which was kind of funny. So, tune around. If you have a shortwave radio, because I don't know you, it's somebody that I never see in a shortwave room. But if you do listen to shortwave, and for those of you that are following me that listen to shortwave, when 11 meters or 10 meters is open because of sporadic E-skip, take the time to start listening from 30 to 54 megahertz, because you will hear stuff there that's quite amazing. You will hear signals propagating from far away, and that is something that is kind of fun because you'll hear all sorts of unusual signals coming through. Another question that came through was the question about are there still some analog cordless phones in the 46 megahertz range. They're pretty much all gone. I mean, it's not zero. I don't know. Somebody somewhere might have never, still be using that old 49 megahertz phone that they had. I would guess, it's not zero, but it's close to zero. If I tune in 46 megahertz range here, I don't hear. There's no more analog phones really. I haven't heard an analog phone signal in a very, very long time on that range. And but there will be one thing that you need to check out, and just here I'm gonna check out here. I'm gonna tune a 49 megahertz frequency here, 49890, and we'll check it out. So here I have one signal on 4987. And I got several between 49, 890, 870, 860. I see these little lines. What you might hear in there, in that frequency range, are some baby monitors. These are very popular, and there's a lot of them. So if there's one thing that you can try, and one fun thing that you can do, and it's something I haven't done in a long time and I should do actually, I always enjoy doing that, is to take a scanner with you and have it scan just a very short portion of 49 megahertz, 49 dot, something like 49.9 to 50 megahertz, something like that, 49.8 to 50 megahertz. In there is concentrated the majority of all the baby monitors. Now, even though there's more advanced baby monitors today, there's 2.4 gigahertz spread spectrum types, and there's 900 megahertz ones. There's still an amazing amount of 49 megahertz baby monitors out there. And these are, and for those that don't know, these are open microphones in your home. I mean, you hear everything. You don't just hear the baby. Anyone listening in can hear whatever is happening. And one of the fun things that I would always do is bring a little scanner with me and take a walk in the streets here. And you would come up to baby monitors and almost be able to pinpoint from what home, from what place the baby monitor comes from. So it's kind of an interesting aspect of the radio listening. It's so funny because I got last time I talked about baby monitors, I got a message. Somebody posted a comment in the VHF section of that baby monitor frequency thing, saying, "Well, only creeps listen to baby monitors." Yeah, right. But it's also a good lesson for everybody to know that we can hear these things. And every time I've heard somebody around me that had children and tell me, "Oh, we're going to buy a baby monitor," and I always tell them, "Yeah, be careful what you're going to buy, because these are open microphones in your home, and I'll hear everything. We can hear everything you say. You need to have the good quality ones that actually are, like spread spectrum 2.4 gigahertz. Now those are impossible to listen to, but it's very, very delicate. You got to be careful. But I mean, wow. If there's something in the 30 megahertz range, 40 megahertz range that you will hear, baby monitors, there are tons of them. If there's none near you, I can tell you, you will just take a walk. Take a walk, and you know what I do, because I don't want to show up with my scanner radio in my hand and people look at me like I'm some kind of weird guy. What often I will do is I'll put it in a coat jacket, and I'll extend the antenna, or often you have just rubber duck antenna, and I'll just have it in my shirt pocket, and I'll put my my earphones from a Walkman earphones, or my Samsung Galaxy phones in it, and it works fine. And just walk around while it's scanning, and you'll hear tons of these baby monitors all around. It's quite weird, and it's funny because you hear all sorts of things. I mean, baby monitors are open microphones to your life and to what's happening in your little world. So you know, it's pretty crazy. So pretty crazy. And remember that you know your whole life is out there when you have a baby monitor. Let me just check here satellites quickly. And finally, well, there's the 54 megahertz or 6 meter amateur band. The 6 meter amateur band is a very interesting band also for. Sorry guys, I'm just looking at what's interesting here. Okay. The 6 meter band is a very interesting band. You might not hear. Some of you might have some local traffic. I've actually, yeah, I did hear some local traffic on this 6 meter band in the bottom part of 50 megahertz with hams in upper sideband. But I've never heard any FM traffic here in Montreal. I don't even know if somebody does it. But when sporadic, like I was mentioning, when sporadic E happens, the 6 meter band comes alive with tons of signals from far away. And you know, just give the example of was last summer that I heard, or two years ago, I heard Brazil on 6 meters, 50 megahertz. I mean, this is truly amazing. Hearing Brazil on 50 megahertz, I can tell you that. And so this is something that that could be very interesting to listen to in that range. Rental clones, what mode do hams use on the 2 meter band? Most of them use FM. Most of them use FM for the most part. There's a little bit of SSB activity. I don't know if there's still one here. There was actually a 2 meter single sideband net, I believe it was on Wednesday evenings, but I'm not sure it's still going on. But most of what I hear is FM on the 2 meter band. Of course, it depends also what you listen to. Like if you listen to ham communications, a mix of FM and single sideband, typically. And there's some you know, Morse code or stuff, but I'd say that 80-90% of everything I hear on the 2 meter band is narrow band FM. So there's a lot of stuff there that's in that range or in that vicinity. I don't know if let me just I'm just gonna check here if what's happening if anything's happening on the local 2 meter band here, just out of curiosity. So yeah, there's something here. Yep. There's something there's a repeater with some activity on 147015, and you know, there's activity on the 2 meter band is lower than it used to be. I remember in the early, once again, in the time of the scanner craze, a lot more activity in the 2 meter ham band, honestly. It's been kind of slower. I don't listen to much of what's happening there because I find most of the communications kind of boring. But you know, it's a ham band. But unfortunately, for a lot of people, it seems to be more like a what I will call a glorified CB band. William Helms, nice to have you on board from Florida. David Arden, nice to have you here. KJ4CY. FM most popular on 2 meters, pretty much. And yeah, the bottom part of the band is in single sideband, and the 144 megahertz part of the band. There's of course digital modes, slow scan TV. There's one of the frequencies on 2 meter for slow scan TV activity. And there's also digital modes, but I don't hear a lot of digital modes on the ham bands most of the time. What else do we have? What else do we have? Let's check it out. Matambale says 6 meters can be very suddenly amazing. Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. David Arden, if you're watching, do Gilles a favor and click the like button. Oh yeah, click the like button. Come on, guys. Yep, the magic band. 6 meters is pretty amazing. So What else do we have? Random clause. Does anyone know what digital TV uses for audio? Well, it's all the digital. It's a digital signal, so everything is in that digital signal. The image, the audio, everything is in there. Everything's in there. So there's no separate audio channel that you can tune in to listen to the audio, which of course rendered a lot of what's happening pretty much obsolete, as you know, all the radios that had these TV band audio that you could listen to, and actually the audio was wide FM, if I'm not, just like FM stations. Wideband FM, I believe, was the audio was from the TV stations. So, you know. Man. Madrid DX, what is it? David Arden says, I had the same question. The audio is digitally mixed into the digital TV signal. Yeah, absolutely. It's a big digital signal. It has the information for the visual, for the image, and the information for the audio. It's really a digital signal. So there's no separate, you know. You could, in the times of analog, you could kind of separate the frequency where the video was sent and the frequency where the audio was sent. And you would hear a difference because there would be a buzzing for the video. There would be the audio next to it. There was like two channels close together, one with the video information, one with the audio information. But now it's all one big digital signal that's being sent all the time that your TV decodes, and in it decodes an image and a sound. Radioactive says, I listened to a cordless phone once, well, more than once, but one time I heard them talking about me, which pissed me off. Well, you know, that's the dangers of of listening to cordless phones. A story about that is one of my good friends that we've been friends since, you know, we went to school when I was young. Is he gave in the late 80s? He actually gave a scanner radio to his dad, and his dad would listen all day long because the next door neighbor would actually call and make calls and receive calls and always talk about him and say to everybody else how he was an idiot and he was like going nuts. And I remember my friend telling me, he says, I have to control my dad. He wants to go over and tell him, what the hell did you say yesterday? And I said, he can't. He's got to keep quiet. And he's got to stop listening anyways. I mean, you know, of course you get annoyed if somebody's calling and calling you an idiot or whatever, you know, and or saying things that you're like, what? Really? But, you know, it's just that. But, you know, I heard so many things over cordless phones. What is interesting about cordless phones was it's your, you know, neighbors. I personally didn't really listen to much cordless phone conversations. My mom did. When I had my first scanner, my mom would actually take it. When you know, she would come over and say, "Are you using your radio tonight?" And I was like, "No, I'm not." She says, "Oh, okay. Can you just put it to those frequencies for the phones, the cordless phones?" Or sometimes she would just say, "Oh, can you put it on the channels for the local police?" And she would actually she would listen to the neighbors. But personally, I didn't really listen to the neighbors. What I was interested in is, where is that neighbor? I was more interested in knowing what's the distance of that cordless phone. You know, there are a couple of neighbors I could recognize by the voice. I knew that they were those neighbors. But, you know, there were some of them, they're like, oh, I wonder who they are, where? And, you know, and I was more interested in knowing where they were than anything else of what they really said. And of course, you know, there's always these same things that I talk about all the time, these things that you hear that you're like, oh, wow. You know, I remember it was so funny because I remember the neighbor on the other side of the street where I lived when I was a teen, when I had my first scanner. Well, I was actually a young adult. I was like 18. Everybody was saying that, you know, she had a when her husband was away, she had another guy come in, and you know, she would cheat her husband, and you know, and that's the kind of thing that I don't, you know, every time I would hear that, it was like, who cares? It's not your problem. It's her life, you know. Who cares? But it's just funny because one early morning, I'm scanning through the cordless phone frequencies, and I hear her voice. I'm like, oh, it's her. And the first thing that she says is, oh, okay, my husband's gone working. You can come over now. And like, you know, 20 minutes later, a car goes through, and I see the guy go, and it's like, well, I guess everybody's right on that story. But, you know, it's like, it's just funny. You hear things like that. You see that everybody's life. Another one that was amazing, and I was living here at the time. In the first year 2000, 2001, the guy that lives across the street, just a little farther away, I don't know it's him. I don't know who he is. A guy calls him up and says, hey, you know that, you know, $500 that I owe you? Yeah. I'm going to pass by your place this morning and give you the money. And he says, oh, I won't be home, but you know what? Put it in the mailbox. Just put it in an envelope in the mailbox. And I remember the guy said, oh, what's your address? And the guy gives his address. I was like, oh, he lives there. Okay. And you know what? I'm not that type of guy, but I gotta tell you, you know, somebody that's just crooked a little bit, you could have made it. You know, that was the moment you could have made a quick $500. I mean, just pick up the $500, and I did see the guy because I was intrigued as to when he's gonna go. And I remember I was looking outside and I saw the guy get out of his car, put an envelope. I was like, oh, there's $500 in that mailbox now. But you know, it's one of those things that you're like, wow, you never know. And you know, I was probably the only one listening, but you don't know who listens. That's the other thing about any device that you might buy. You have no idea who is listening around you. You know, I don't know about you guys, but a lot of what we do, we keep a very low profile because we know that it sometimes can have an impact on people around you. For example, here, I never asked really my landlord for outdoor antennas. He did notice that I have antennas and never said anything. But I always thought, you know, in my hobby, the less people know what I do, the better it is. You know, I try to put my wires at night so nobody knows or sees that I'm doing something, or and put tin wires, you know, outdoors so that nobody knows or sees. But you know, and still people notice. I remembered last year, I think, my neighbor in the backyard this lady I talked to quite regularly, you know, nice lady. And one day she says, "Can I ask you a question?" I said, "What? What's that wire in the backyard?" "Oh, well, it's, you know, a shortwave antenna, and I'm listening to the world with it." And she was like, "Oh, really? You're listening to station around the world?" I said, "Yeah, it's my hobby, you know." And but you know what? You don't want too many people knowing. You don't want too many people knowing also for another reason. I mean, antennas equal possible expensive equipment in your home that people can steal. So, you know, all of these reasons. Nut jobs that think that because you put up that antenna now that they can't receive anything on TV anymore or whatever, when in fact it has absolutely nothing, especially for guys like me that are just listening. But that said, you don't know who's listening. And if you don't have a lot of equipment, like, you know, I look at my scanner radios for a long time. All I had was portable scanner with an indoor antenna. Well, you don't know that there's somebody next to you, not very far, listening in on a conversation you're having right now. So it's kind of interesting, you know. But there's still a lot of baby monitors, still a lot. In the big city, like here, there's a lot of them. On 49 megahertz, when I was earlier, I could see the lines of at least 4 or 5 of them. There's still quite a lot of them on 49 megahertz. They're still very popular because they're the cheap ones. The 49 megahertz ones are very, very cheap. So they're always popular because they're really cheap. And, you know, people don't understand anything of that. I've always thought about one thing, and it's the fact that, and I remember somebody telling me once, well, you know, you shouldn't be allowed to listen to the cordless phones. You shouldn't be allowed to listen to the baby monitors. And you guys in the U.S. know that there've been a regulation, and you guys have these parts of the bands that were, you know, ripped out of your radios. And here in Canada, they had a different view. They decided, no, we're not going to prevent that. And, you know, I've always thought about it in a very different way personally. It's not up to me to stop listening to something. If you want to have private communications, it's up to the manufacturer to create a device that encrypts or, you know, digitizes the sound so that we don't hear anything. It's not because, you know, the problem isn't me listening. The problem is these phones, maybe they should have been, you know, digital from the start. I don't know. Randy, Riverside, California, nice to have you here. And as we have, Page Master says, I use my scanner to test transmitters on board Beechcraft 300 and C90 GTIs. By tuning to the correct frequency, I can hear if those transmitters are functioning correctly. Cool. Yes, I did see the NOAA 19 satellite go through. Yes, Paul is just wondering, wondering what's happening, and wants to have my attention. So, William Helm says a lot of Asian neighbors I used to have had cordless phones in 40 megahertz range. You know, I'm sure there's, if anybody walks around or goes around, I'm sure there's probably a few of them still scattered and working around. But there've been, you know, what's mostly, because some people say, well, you know, I have these 2.4 gigahertz, and no, you know what? No. Most of everything cordless phone has been replaced by these things. The smartphones and the cell phones are what replaced, you know, they've become so cheap today that they are what replaced pretty much the cordless phones. You know, cordless phones, why did we have cordless phones? Well, we were tired of having the phone attached to a wall with that, you know. You guys probably remember, I remember talking to some friends. The phone was on the table near the living room, and I would extend the wire as far as I can and really stretch that spring cable as much as I can to talk to my friends in another room, or sometimes just lying down on the floor or something, you know. And when cordless phones arrived, well, that was cool because it's, oh, cordless phone, I can talk everywhere in the home. But even though there were new technologies of cordless phones, you know, they started with the first ones were low. The first ones, if you guys remember, the first cordless phones were AM mode, and they were in 1.7 megahertz range. The expanded AM band that we have today, 1610 to 1710 kilohertz, that was the first generation of cordless phones. They were in that range. I remember one of my uncles in the 80s had a cordless phone, and I was amazed at the cordless phone. And I remember wondering what frequency range they were using, and I had noticed that when I picked up the phone and I was on my DX100, realistic DX100 shortwave radio, that in the bottom part of 1.67 megahertz, I'd hear the dial tone in my radio. And I was like, oh, they're in that range. So those were the first ones. These were in AM mode in the 1.7 to 1.8 megahertz range. These were the first ever cordless phones that existed. Then there was, 49 megahertz were the next generation. Those became much better. They were clearer. They were much more, they were FM, so the sound was better, range was better, less interference, because of course there's less interference at 49 megahertz than there is at 1.7 megahertz. And those became very popular. I mean, a lot of people had those. And I remember I had a Sanyo. My first cordless phone I bought was a Sanyo in 93, maybe. It was a 49 megahertz one. And by chance, because, I'm the radio guy that likes to experiment, I remember I was thinking, hey, what if I unplug the base station and just pick up the handset? And when I did that, one day, I was hearing somebody talk. And I noticed it was my next door neighbor. She had the same phone. So one day I thought, that's kind of interesting. One day, nothing's happening. I unplug my base station and I press the button to get, to dial. And I'm hearing a dial tone. I was able to actually get the dial tone from our phone. So I was on our line because my phone and her phone were the same model. That's where they actually decided at some point to do those security codes where you put the handset on the base. It actually sends a security code between the handset and the base to match, so that they know that you're actually communicating with the right base station. And if you weren't doing that, your phone was unusable. It had to be paired to that base station. But for a long time, people could do that. You could, I could have made long distance calls from her phone if I wanted. It was nuts. So then the 49 megahertz, then we had 900 megahertz ones. I heard quite a few of those in the 900 megahertz range over the years. And then there were some 2.4 gigahertz. Most of them spread spectrum, meaning that you could not tap into the communications. But a lot of them, there was still some analog there. And sometimes it was a mixed bag. So the spread spectrum of 2.4 gigahertz was there. But the funniest thing is that the handset, for example, was still analog 900. So it was a mix. Is that the handset was receiving a spread spectrum 2.4, but the handset was actually transmitting the voice on 900 megahertz analog, which was kind of weird. So there's like mixed bags of all those things. But I haven't heard anything. I haven't heard any cordless phones in quite a long time now. And I think most of it is being because of the smartphones, honestly. Maglone, nice to have you here. Jared Conway, nice to have you on board. Bob Geist, nice to have you here. Bob into DET. Ruth Fisher, what do you think of Baofeng making such cheap stuff, also bringing in frequency channels that you need a license for in the UK? The problem is, there's regulations, and yeah, you technically you shouldn't have one of those if you're not licensed, or especially the frequency ranges that they allow you to broadcast to and transmit to. And the FCC in the United States is cracking down on those a lot. They are actually, if you buy a Baofeng on eBay, chances are of you receiving it in the US is now greatly reduced, because they're cracking down on these cheap radios that you can get from eBay, the Baofeng stuff. I was just curious the other day. I was looking through eBay for these things, and I mean, there was a Baofeng that broadcast almost the entire VHF range you could transmit on. And it was like ridiculous. It was like $35. And you're like, really? And that thing can transmit everywhere? And the problem with that is, they shouldn't be sold to anyone. And the problem is with eBay and the international shipping of everywhere around the world, that's where the problem is. Now there's like there's no regulation and stuff that prevents these. You can, but I mean, it's not like selling it in a store. If they would sell it in a store here in Canada, they would quickly, you know, the Industry Canada would go and say, hey, you're selling stuff that are not allowed. These should not be sold here. Problem is now we're getting it through the mail from China, so nobody's checking, and people are getting that, and people are using them like they were two-way walkie-talkies that look so cool, not understanding that in reality you're not allowed to use them, and if you are using them, you're allowed to use them only in the amateur bands with a license. It's a very, very big problem actually here for that. So you know, it's a lot of them buy these stuff, and it's kind of crazy. Really, really crazy. And you know, it's creating these problems because here and there we hear of people that use these cheap bow things as two-way talkies because they don't know. They don't know that you shouldn't be using them. They don't know that it's illegal. And I guess, you know, it's one day there's going to be tougher regulation when someone's going to use it in a frequency that's used by, say, law enforcement, and then suddenly you're interfering with really important stuff, and they're going to understand that now we gotta do something about it. Like in the U.S., honestly. Radio comms, nice to have you on board, my friend. What else do we have? David Arden says, with the current terrorism threat, we can be perceived as less than desirable. You know, there's a side to our hobby that we got to be careful with. I mean, I always wondered when in the 80s I was writing to all of these Eastern Bloc countries, you know, and I was always thinking, well, I wonder if in Ottawa somewhere there's a little box, a little something with, a file with my name on it and saying, hey, this guy gets mail from Russia and from Eastern Bloc countries and so on. And I wouldn't be surprised because, you know, it's funny because somebody told me once that I hadn't mentioned it and said, you're nuts, you know, come on, they're not doing that. You know what? I wouldn't be surprised that that file still exists. I wouldn't be surprised that even though the world has changed somewhat, that file is still there because they're like, you know what? For a long time, that guy been receiving mail from everywhere around the world. Just in case, let's keep a little something, a little note, just in case, you know. And I think as radio hobbyists, you know, we have an interesting aspect to our hobby. We are capable of receiving quite a lot of signals that the average population doesn't even know exists. A perfect example, number stations. I mean, honestly, most people don't know they exist. Honestly, most people don't know what we can hear. Honestly, on cordless phones, 90% of everybody that used a cordless phone in his life probably never knew that somebody like us was capable of listening on to into their conversation. Most people thought that these were safe. And companies play a role in there because how many of these devices that you purchased, and on the box they were saying, oh, this has security codes. Now, yeah, they have security codes so that the base station and the handset can match. It didn't mean anything else. It wasn't secure in communications itself. We could still hear it. You know, the FRS, the little FRS talkies. Oh, you've got security codes. No, these are CTSS codes. They're tone codes that just prevent the squelch from being triggered without the proper code. But there's nothing private. But they advertise it as, oh, you have your private channel. Yeah, your private channel with the 200 other guys that are actually doing it with different codes or no codes at all. It's dumb. These companies have a role to play in what they actually sell and do. Honestly, the Baofangs thing, yeah, they shouldn't be sold here. You know, I mean, if you're capable of transmitting on a frequency that you're not supposed to, they shouldn't be sold. You know, it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. Because, I mean, you could really, really interfere with very important stuff. I can tell you that. Elton Byington says, antennas mean this guy can fix my broken electronics to many people. I never fix anything but my own equipment, because if you fix it, you own it. Radioactive says, RTL SDR dongles have fixed the aspect of missing parts of the spectrum here in the USA. Absolutely. And then again, you know, that's another way of looking at a regulation, is that, okay, an RTL SDR dongle can pass through regulations. And honestly, and I think this is a great, one of the things that we're talking about also, is that look at the regulation they did to prevent you guys from buying equipment that could listen to the cell phone frequencies and the cordless phone frequencies. What does it do today? Nothing. Because all of these ranges today are unused. There's no more cordless phones. There's no more analog cell band. But still, the regulation is there. The radios have to have that cut out, because by law it's required and you got to do it. But it's a nonsense today, because that law is still an ancient thing of the past and has never been updated. And that's why, you know, I always think that regulation is dumb for that reason. But also, look at all the stuff that goes through RTL SDR dongles. They listen to the cell band. They listen to that frequency range that you're not supposed to. Nobody says anything or does anything because they're flagged as a different type of device, I guess. So, you know, it's really dumb. And like I always say, the frequencies should never, you should not have a radio that's stripped off of whatever frequency to listen to. I am the guy that thinks, no, just force the companies to make it digital and unencryptable. So put it encrypted, and that we can do nothing about it. Hey, we won't listen. We won't be able to do anything about that signal. That's it. I mean, you know, it's... But they didn't want, because, you know, selling a cordless phone with some form of digital signal in it suddenly would up the price by, you know, $10. And they didn't want to do that. They want to have the cheap phones. So instead of paying to have encryption on a phone, they'd rather have, hey, just cut off the frequency. And another part of that legislation that is completely idiot, you decide tomorrow morning, oh, let's block that frequency range. Hey, wise guy, there are millions of radios out there that have already been sold that get it. And now what you're saying is that these guys that have these radios, they're going to hang on to it even more, because they're going to keep it. And they know that that radio can listen to that stuff. So it didn't fix anything. When that law came into order, oh, yeah, okay, you ask every manufacturer to block the frequencies, but there were millions of radios listening to those frequencies already. What it changed is nothing at all. It was just like, you know, it's a stupid way of thinking about things. It's crazy. David Arden, we had frequencies ripped from radios because all of the lobbying that cellular did. It was cheaper for them to forbid us from listening than to add encryption. And like I said, millions of radios were already sold with that in there. Millions of them were already sold with, you know, like the Pro 2006 that I have here, that you just clip the diode and, hey, you're back on the bands. So, you know, Paul P., nice to have you on board from West Midlands in England. So really nice to have you here. Bullfrog 89, KD2CXU from Albany, New York. Nice to have you here. What else do we have? Let's go down. Just looking at there. Hey, Kimberly, K6YYL, nice to have you on board from California. Pretty cool. Pretty Active says, I'm pretty sure we're on the CIA, NSA lists and other security agencies. You know, we might be even surprised to another point. Maybe just being an amateur radio operator. Getting your license. Because now you're flagged at the government for your license. Maybe just that is enough to flag you for other agencies. So, you know. Val says, why single out Baofeng? There are plenty of other transmitters. You can just buy them and transmit. I mean, even you have transceiver behind you that you're not allowed to use to transmit. Yeah, but you know, what I'm saying here is not that. I mean, I'm allowed to own it. I'm not allowed to transmit on it because I don't have my license. And I am aware of it. And it's on the amateur bands. And okay, to be fair, a couple of times here in Montreal, I've heard hams talk about some guys that use the Baofengs, thinking they're two-way talkies, and they're unlicensed and having two-way communications on the 2-meter band when they shouldn't. So I don't know what to think about it, honestly, because it comes down simply to the fact of, should we just regulate that you shouldn't have a radio if you don't have a license to transmit? You shouldn't have one. So should they enforce the regulation that I can't have this if I don't have a license because it can transmit? I don't know. It's a complex thing. The problem is I don't know, it's the education, and even with education there are people that just don't care, honestly. Some people, even though they know they shouldn't use it, will still use it. And some people, you know, do you educate people to let them know that, well, without a license you can't transmit? You know, I don't know. It's a complex thing. I don't know. And you know, and that comes more of a, it's a very unique thing in there. You know, it's, what do we do exactly? And we just block all of those transceivers coming in. We wait until something bad happens and suddenly we block because we just saw the possibility of something bad happening. I don't know. It's a very complex issue. I mean, it's complicated to deal with that. I know. But I can bet you 90% of everybody that looks at that on eBay, you know, let's face it, two guys, they say, hey, we should have a pair of talkies that we can talk with each other. And instead of going to, you know, some electronic shop and getting FRS, no license talkies or stuff like that, they go on eBay. And they say, oh, look at that. Two-way talkies, $30 each. That broadcast on the 2-meter band or the VHF range. Some of them have the maritime band you can transmit on. These people aren't looking at, is it allowed, not allowed? Is, oh, look at that. These are two-way talkies. This is so cool. Let's buy them. They're cheap. They just don't know better. They don't know that it's illegal to use them. They are going to use them. It's a very, very complex thing. And the only way you can prevent that is to stop selling them, unless the guy has a license. It's very, very difficult to deal with that, honestly. You gotta block them. It's the only way you can do it. So, Mario DX says, remember David in Barcelona saying that somebody in Spain using Baofeng and talking on a frequency that was used for satellite uplink. In situations like that, it can be dangerous. Absolutely. I mean, look at the ones I've seen can transmit on the marine band, VHF marine band. So you don't know about it, and you're on the VHF distress calling frequency, and you're talking and chatting with your friends, and some emergency pops up, and nobody can hear it well because there's two guys talking on the frequency. It's something. Hey David, nice to have you on board from Barcelona, EA3IEK. Says he's also a Baofeng owner, a UVS9, which is a recent model to at least have something to transmit with when away from the shack. So, the problem is nobody knows. They have to be blocked, VE3KRP, nice to have you on board, Fast Eddie, in Thunder Bay, Ontario. Nice to have you on board, my friend. I got your email, by the way. I saw it yesterday. I've been checking it. So, and the Baofeng are very, very cheap. I mean, they're not the best radios around, but they're darn surprising for the price and what they do. And that's the thing. David Arden says, I have heard that some South American drug dealers use U.S. military satellite service frequencies for their dealings. Yeah, they use those 200 megahertz, 270, 280 megahertz satellite frequencies, and they can actually use these U.S. military satellite to communicate. Absolutely, and they are available for so cheap. Bullfrog 89 says, personally, I think the Baofeng is fine. Those that are broadcasting illegally, it falls on them. That'd be like making cars that go over the speed limit illegal because of other people speeding. Every aspect of every device is, you're not wrong in there. I mean, why do we have cars that have the speed go to 200 kilometers an hour when in reality the roads here are 100 kilometers an hour maximum? And some will go at 140 and 150 on those cars. Vault says, in theory, there's an agency in every country that should be running and catching people who transmit. Just changing the law would make it hard to buy cell transceivers. Yeah, I get it. But the problem is these agencies are not doing their job because they have been here in Canada. The Industry Canada has no resource. So Industry Canada doesn't do much. They will attack specific things when there's people complaining about it. So if there's interference in the ham bands, well then so what's going to happen is that some amateur radio operators will complain about it. They will complain about it to Industry Canada. Industry Canada, if they have enough complaints and information, will do something about it. And thing is, there might be something happening. But, it's like the FCC in the United States. They have no more resource. It's not like in the 80s. In the 80s, there were tons of people working for these agencies. Every city had some people that would be able to monitor and do things. We're in a time where these agencies are just stretched and there's nothing, unless they get somebody complaining about something, they just have no resource to do anything about it. I guess it's human nature, It's it's really human nature. These things are available. These things are around. I could be I could be one of those that didn't do anything about radio and not be here, do live shows, and not know a thing, and say, "Oh, look at that," and call up my friend and say, "Hey, have you seen these two-way walkie-talkies that broadcast in VHF ranges? Hey, they're cheap. Let's buy a pair and have fun." And for the most part, I think there are two types of people buying Baofengs: amateur radio operators that definitely know what they're doing and how to use them and if they can use them. And there's a lot of people that buy them, cheap two-way talkies, and have no idea that it's illegal to use them. It's a very, very, it's a very unique thing. It's a very complex thing. I know. It's very difficult. What you do with that, you know? You leave it alone, and I don't know. I don't know what to think, honestly. I am, you know, because we talk about regulation and stuff. I'm one of those that ain't. I'm not the type of guy that likes governments regulating everything. I'm the kind of guy, let's just take it easy on the regulations and on the laws of stuff. Yes, there needs to be laws, but you know, at the same time, like Vault says, if we make it really complicated for these things to get here, then it gets super complicated to buy equipment and stuff. You know, here most ham radio outlets, most ham radio stores, because there's no law that prevents me from owning this at all. The only regulation right now is I can't transmit on it because I'm not licensed. But there's a lot of stores that sell ham radio gear in Canada that what they'll do is ask you for the proof that you have your license, and then they'll send you and sell you that radio, you know. Elton Byington says there's a YouTube clip that shows how to clip a diode that opens the transmitter of the ICOM IC7300 transceiver. There's a YouTube video that shows how to take the FT450 and have it transmit on every frequency range you want in the shortwave bands. It's the same thing. This thing can be open to transmit on every range of the shortwave bands. It's actually a jumper that needs to be removed. So, you know. But Elton, one of the things, at least with that, is that that person that will do that usually is knowledgeable about what they can or cannot do. It's a different thing, you know. I mean, a Baofeng, because it's two different things. Baofeng, you get it and it does it. At least in the ICOM IC7300 or the Yaesu 450 here, you gotta do something to open the frequency ranges. So first of all, you got that, and maybe you've got your AM license, and you will broadcast to the bands. A lot of owners of these radios will never do any mods on it and never change anything. One of the things that I believe, and I'm not sure, is that I'm trying to remember the regulations of amateur licensing. In amateur radio licensing, is it legal for an amateur radio operator to modify his radio in such a way that it also can transmit outside the frequency ranges of amateur bands? Is that something that is permitted? Because I know also that depending on the license you've got, you can do or not different things. I believe there are advanced licenses where you're allowed to build your own equipment for transmit purposes, but when you have the basic license, you're allowed to use commercial already made transceivers, but not modified transceivers or things that you build yourself. I'm not totally sure totally sure on this one. Oh yeah, absolutely, David. Moderator DXer. Hey, David Arden. You are a moderator on this channel. Absolutely. You are welcome. Thanks for suggesting Moderator DXer. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's put for sure so that everybody can be yep, moderator. So here we go. So David is now a moderator here too. You know, David says, I obviously won't use my Baofeng to transmit outside of the frequency allocations my ham license authorizes me to operate on. That would be something very foolish to do. Yeah, you know. Bullfrog 9 says, Baofeng has its place. I've been trying to get students at the college into a radio. We had Baofengs that we set up for FRS, and they could listen in to amateurs. You know. Kind of interesting. Radioactive says, the last I heard, FCC had 2 agents to respond to interference issues for the West Coast. You know, there's like almost nobody here to do that also. Yeah, David, you're probably a moderator on the shortwave channel, but I never had give you a new moderator on the this channel. So now you are moderator here also. Vaults says, and yet it is their job. It is no reason to make it hard for citizens to buy sell radios just because they're not doing their job for whatever reason. Yeah, I guess so. I guess so. You know, there's absolutely there is a reason for that agency to exist, and you're right. They should be here doing their jobs, and they're not because there's no resource behind it. So you know. Mandriel DXer, the reason we mentioned Baofeng about this subject is because they are most easily available transceivers out there on the internet sites. Even if other makes are available, but Baofengs do go for very cheap. Yeah, you know, we're talking about Baofengs, but there's, like you said, there's a lot more than Baofengs there. La fin du monde, the end of the world. And we're already an hour and a half into the show. And you know, it's very interesting, by the way, what we are talking about right now. Regulations and these transceivers on the VHF UHF ranges that go for cheap that you can get on. I mean, you know, another example. Anybody that goes on eBay can buy from China a marine radio. No license, no nothing answered. Hey, you've got a transceiver there. It's in the marine bands. For some people, that might actually look like a CB radio with all the channels on it, you know? Radioactive. If an amateur operator is a Mars operator, a military auxiliary radio system operator, then you can have the Mars mod done professionally, which opens up the radio to transmit on any frequency I tune. David Alden says, I'm certain that a ham can modify his radio, but he/she can only transmit on authorized frequencies. We have Mars frequencies that require non-ham frequencies. Because in the so on the Yaesu 450, Yaesu itself mentions the modification is possible on this radio to transmit everywhere. With, of course, they do talk about the fact that if you are a Mars operator, that's why the radio is modifiable to be able to use it in that way. So I totally understand that this can be done. But I'm pretty certain that I'm pretty certain that depending on your license, there's a limit to what modifications and stuff you can do on your equipment. I remember reading some of the regulations, and I believe if you have a basic amateur license, there are even modifications and stuff you can't do on your own equipment unless you are elevated in the license requirements. If you're a more advanced ham, you can do, I know that the top level license, you can pretty much modify, create your own equipment. You can design your own transceiver. I don't think you can do all of that if you're on the basic license. I'm pretty sure there are limits to modifications and things you do on the basic license of amateur radio. It's not everybody that has that possibility. As for the modifications, yeah, Mars operation. And actually, Yaesu does say that it's for Mars operation that they had the possibility to unlock the radio. Max Strong says, I have a Kenwood TS850 that I bought used. It transmits anywhere. Yeah, it must have been modified because I think by default they're not. By default they are restricted to the ham bands. Elton Byington says, permitted only for ham Mars operation. There's no restriction on build your own equipment, but a ham would be foolish to operate outside the ham bands. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yet, I'm pretty sure there are some of those, I'm pretty sure there's some of those pirates that are probably amateur radio operators. You're talking about foolish being outside the ham bands. Just look as an example, and how easy it could be to get discovered. And you got to be careful what you do when you do something. There's an amateur radio operator that lives in Laval, just north of here in Montreal, and his voice is very recognizable. And I hear him in the 80-meter bands almost every night, having a chit chat with some friends. Yet, I hear him when propagation works on. I hear him on 27555 in the 11-meter band calling CQ. Yet, 27555 is technically an illegal frequency for him to transmit on. It's outside of the CB band, so it's not a CB. And he is an amateur radio operator. And, I remember hearing his voice, and it's like, what? That guy is the ham that I hear in the evening on the 80-meter band, and now he's on 27555 calling. Crazy. You got to be careful. Eddie Essex says, I just lost it. Let me just go back here. Eddie Essex says, CBers for years have been putting mods on their rigs, hams, tuning the outputs, all illegal, but way back to the 70s they used to need a license. Now no need for license for CB. Yeah, I understand. I understand that. Here's the same thing. We needed a license in the 60s, 70s to own a CB radio. It went away in the 80s, I believe, where they just opened up. But man, I mean, when Skip is there, you could hear all these guys with humongous signals and probably amazing power being used on the CB band, honestly. David says, I know something that's done sometimes, at least here in Spain, is to open up radios, make them able to transmit on their frequency coverage so they can be used for the CB band. Ah, interesting. Hey, Brett Wayne, nice to have you here. KC2NXP. David Arden, if you drink too many of those beers, it might yeah. I actually have, David, a funny moment. What was last year? I did a shortwave show, and I had a six-pack of Fin du Monde, which is a 9% beer. And I know that my limit will be pretty much 3 of them. And after that, I gotta relax and drink coffee or something. because more than that, I know that I'll have a hungover. And I had a lot of fun, I remember having a lot of fun with the shortwave show. And when it ended, I continued listening to shortwave, and I was like, yeah, what the hell? Opened up the 4th beer and 5th beer and 6th beer. I drank the whole 6-pack. And I went to bed at midnight, and I remember going to bed and saying, man, I'm drunk. And waking up in the morning is like, oh man, I'm hungover from the 6-pack of Fendimon yesterday. Which told me, don't do that. Oh man. Mad Reader the Xer, if in the US they are cracking down on biofilms, what about things like SDRs that can be used to listen? And you know, there's you're right here. They're cracking down on biofilms, possibly because they transmit, which may be more of a problem. But absolutely, if somebody somewhere could decide that, hey, we're going to crack down on SDR, RTL SDR dongles. Hey, no more of those coming into the US suddenly, you know? It's crazy. Man. Eddie SX says, in Canada, 2 levels of license, basic with honors, not allowed to build or modify. Second level is advanced, you can build and modify. Okay, I thought there was some kind of change. There was the basic where you can't modify, you can't build your own stuff. And they're the one that you can actually build or modify. Okay, I was sure. So here in Canada, at least, there is a difference between the basic and the advanced license. Brett Wayne says, I would never transmit on 27555 KC2NXP. So you know, it's crazy. Hey Matt, nice to have you here. W0MDK. Yeah, HF direction finding is somewhat a little off in general because of propagation. So, and that's why pirates on the HF. We talk on the International Radio Report on Sunday mornings about. We regularly talk about pirates that get caught on the FM band. I mean, it's darn easy to pinpoint someone broadcasting on the FM band. So, it would be kind of easy if we take the time to, for example, get one of those guys on a Baofeng and pinpoint pretty much where he's transmitting from. These are much easier to find because they're, line of sight and pinpointing or direction finding of these signals is easy. On the shortwave bands, I mean, come on, it's long distance. You can roughly know where it comes from, but you won't pinpoint exactly where he is. It's roughly in that vicinity, Radiocoms says there are licensed ham operators that have dual hobbies. They were originally CD operators before they got their ham license. Yeah, a lot of people in the ham world were CB operators, absolutely. And I got no problem with that either. I mean, it's okay. I mean, there's 2 types of people that pretty much came into the hobby of amateur radio. Some of them were like me, shortwave listeners. I was also a CBer, quite active in the 80s. But mostly shortwave listeners. So some people were shortwave listeners, discovered the ham hobby, and became hams. The thing is, the other generation, the other types of people were CBers that became amateur license at some point. Radioactive says, in the US, I'm not aware of class of amateur license that we cannot build, repair, modify equipment. Oh, interesting. So it's a Canadian thing. Because I do remember reading the regulations, and I think it was on the Industry Canada website. So you guys see that I've been studying pretty well for my ham license. And I do remember that hearing, reading, and so it's probably just Canada, at least, that the basic license, you cannot modify or build your own equipment. It's forbidden. You need to have the more advanced license to have that capability. Vol says, speaking of your offline radio show, have they considered adding streaming of the live show to YouTube? There are a lot of radio stations that do similar thing. Oh, well, okay, yeah, I get it. When you're talking about the International Radio Report thing, yeah, there would, because on the website they do have like online stuff, but that would be nice, adding the streaming of the live show to YouTube. That would be nice. I could actually do it, honestly. I could do it from my phone. It's 30 minutes. I would actually be able to stream. You know, I'm going to do it. Let me think about it. Let me think about it. We're going to do something about that. It's an interesting idea. Streaming from the CKUT studio. That could be kind of interesting. Yeah, okay. Huh. They can't do it there, but I could do it on my own. That's something I could talk about tomorrow. Maybe you guys would like that also. I mean, I don't want to take away the views from ckut.ca or the listenership or anything, but I think adding a International Radio Report streaming event could be an interesting aspect of it, I would guess. So it's interesting. So I guess the regulations are here in Canada more than in the United States. Max Headstrong says there used to be a monster FCC listening post just southwest of Grand Rapids, Michigan. I remember in the 80s, I was listening to some amateur radio operators on the Patrolman CB60. There was one repeater I could hear really well on it, and they were talking about activity and how they were at the Montreal office of what back then was, I believe, the CRTC. Because it was moved to Industry Canada somewhere in the 90s, I believe. And they were active at picking up CBers that would interfere with you know, others and with TVs and stuff. Things that, of course, today is like, you know. Radioactive says, I started as a CBer with modified Cobra 148 GTL, which was cool, but I got tired of the hash and trash on CB bands. You know, and imagine, when I started the CB time, it was in the 80s, and the maximum of solar activity back then, every day was hell. Every day was skip everywhere. I remember going on the bands, trying to talk to my friend that was like 10 streets away. In the evening, with no skip, nothing, it was easy to talk. We could hear each other really well. But in the daytime, skip from the US was so strong that we couldn't even hear each other on the channels. It was crazy. Matt says that's the reason why the crackdown is controversial. The regulations say you can't transmit on certain bands, but nothing about possessing equipment that can transmit when you're not allowed. Yeah. Yeah. You know. Yeah, we'll have the official ham radio channel. Just crazy. I have no idea, Radioactive. I don't think there would be. I don't think there would be any rules against streaming or doing a live feed from CKUT, a video feed on YouTube. I wouldn't see why there would be such a rule. It's just that nobody ever set up anything to do it. That's all. I'm going to talk to Sheldon about it tomorrow. if we can set up something. I was also thinking about another thing, because one of the problems with CKUT, we don't have feedback of an audience. By doing that, we would have actually people in the chat room that would let us know that a certain number of people are actually watching the live feed and listening to the show at the same time, which would be interesting, because right now, you know, at CKUT, it's a radio station. You're in a studio. You don't know who's listening in. If somebody's listening in, you have no idea. So that would be a nice thing for sure also. Matt says, anyone can own a transceiver, licensed or no. You just can't transmit if you're not licensed, or make sure you stick to your designated frequencies if you're a general technical class. Bill, W3WDR. In 1967, my CB call was KRP9845. Tom McManus, nice to have you on board from New Orleans. David Arden was KBPN5584. Wow, this is interesting. Radio comms as first Midland 100M. Interesting. Yeah, but they don't have anything there, Vaults. But I could add that capability. I could actually do it on my own. But CKUT is a very low budget station, Vaults. So just adding anything that would cost money is out of the question. It's already complicated there. But I could maybe do it and have it streamed over one of my channels. That would be a nice one. That would be a nice thing, actually. So, you know. Yeah, I guess they all switched to 7200, the net jobs of 14313. It's crazy. Bill W3WDR says 3600 night, some idiots sometimes. Same idiots, really. Wow. But they have an 80 meter frequency. Jim Howard, nice to have you here, says my first radio for short-wave listening was S38D in 1955. N0UWY, nice to have you here. Eddie SX says in USA the technician and general tests have 35 questions and the extra has 50. You need a score of 74% to pass. That's 26 correct on the tech in general, 37 on the extra in Canada. Yeah, we got 100 questions. Simon Warburton, nice to have you here. What's the beer? It's Fin du Monde, the end of the world, from a local brewery here in Quebec. Eddie SX says 100 questions on Canadian tests, 70% to pass, 80% honors, drawn randomly from a pool of 1,000 questions. Last time I passed the test online, I had 87%, something like that. Once I had 90%. Only once did the random question sent to me give me like 78% or something. But most of the time I'm 80%. I should actually practice tonight and do the 100 questions again just to see what my score is going to be like. Matt says nobody makes a mockery of the FCC like W6WBJ. His license revoked in 2007 but still transmitting because he's a lawyer who's strung out his legal case to this very day. Yeah. It's crazy. Crazy what's happening. Yeah, it's interesting. You guys in the US, the GMRS and FRS stuff is licensed. Here, there's no license to use GMRS. I've got one of those here. I got several of those here. And it's totally free here. The only thing that is very important, you guys in the United States have repeaters possible. You have the possibility of setting up repeaters on GMRS. and you have the possibility, I believe, to go to 50 watts, where here in Canada everything is 5 watt maximum on every frequency, and there's no repeaters. You're not allowed to put repeaters up if I'm not mistaken here in Canada. It's a different way of thinking. Pretty much radioactive. From all the times that I passed that test, I would just go and pass the test, and I would just pass it. So yeah, FRS is free, Matt. You're right on that. The FRS, which is a 14 channels, the first 14 channels, FRS is not licensed. The GMRS is licensed. These are the ones that have more channels. They go to 20. What is it? 21 channels? There's more channels, anyways. So FRS is unlicensed, but it is limited to 500 milliwatts, I believe. So so for example, like here, if I transmit with one of my GMRS, channels 1 to 7 are 5 watts. Channels 8 to 14 are 500 milliwatts. These are the ones that are unlicensed, I believe, for you guys also. And channels 15 and up are once again 5 watts. So there's like a wattage thing that's different depending on the channels of the GMRS used. So the ones that are probably 500 milliwatts are unlicensed. And the ones that go up to 5 watts or more are the ones that are licensed, I would guess. So, not yet, Volts. Actually, I'm looking at what should I do, because I can pass the test without having to pass the course. Now, honestly, I would like to, probably pass the course anyway, because I'm sure I'm going to learn stuff that I haven't grasped all of it yet. But honestly, if somebody tomorrow would say, hey, an official examiner would say, hey, just come and pass the test, I would just go and pass the test. And I know I would have above 80%. I'm pretty sure. Without having to do anything else. Matt says, teachers in my school use GMRS. I'm pretty sure. I was asking someone in the office about it, and they said that they had to get a license because they needed more powerful talkies. Huh, possible. Bobby, don't worry, I'm looking at the time, Bobby. I still have a little bit of time. So, no rush. No rush. When I know that it's getting close to the time I need to leave, I'll be checking it out. And by the way, just out of a little moment here, if you enjoy what we do and we're talking about, hey, there's some hams here. Look at that, 790. 146790. There's a repeater with activity on it. So if you like what I do, donations, of course, are welcome. They help to pay for the equipment, for the expensive internet, for the expensive computer I'm about to purchase, and they keep me on the air. So if you like what I do, please consider a little something. Really, really helps me out. Even the monetization on YouTube has been crappy in the past week because they have been struck by many announcers because they had child pornography stuff on YouTube. Yeah, that's YouTube for you. So a lot of advertisers have decided this week to stopped advertising and immediately showed on my YouTube channels. Monetization went down immediately when that was announced. So anyways, if you want to help me out, if you like what I do, don't forget that we are here to entertain, and if you enjoy the stuff, it's a patreon.com/radio and computers, where you can actually become a patron also. PayPal is another great way to give a little something. So don't forget, I'm here to entertain, and I'm here all the time. So if you enjoy what I do, please think about it. Please think about it. And let's go down here. Okay, we are back. So here in Canada, we have the basic qualifications, which is the first level of amateur radio. I'm trying to see what's happening. Okay, here we go. So basic qualifications. And then you've got advanced qualifications. So let's see here. Advanced qualification added to your basic qualification will allow you to build and operate your own transmitting equipment. Okay, sponsor a club station. And there's the advanced qualifications that require Morse code at 5 words per minute. From what I see here in the ham bands. What else do we have? Here we're going to have some Bullfrog 89. We're going to have some freezing rain on Sunday. I will probably need tomorrow morning some skates to go to CKUT 90.3 FM. Talk McManus says, really glad they dropped the CW requirement to get an amateur radio license. Tried many years ago, hated the code. You know, I think it's okay that the basic requirements, they've removed code. You know, a lot of hams got mad at that requirement removed. They were saying, well, we passed it with CW. Yeah, but at the same time, in times where our hobby is at risk because of all sorts of things, including new technologies, let's just make it a little easier. I think it just can help. So what is exactly the mechanism in Canada? Here are just scheduled exams, I think, 2 or 3 times a year. You sign up and go pay and try to pass them. I'm not totally sure, but many of the people I've talked to seem to not really want a guy that passes just an exam without having to go through the course. They want you to go through the course and pass the exam at the end. They don't want you to just go pass an exam. So I don't know. I'm going to ask a local club this week because I'm serious about getting my license. So I'm going to actually ask this week and ask all the questions I need to ask to the local club here in Montreal. We'll be checking that out. So the problem is I would pass. Honestly, I did the test on Industry Canada website. I would pass. Not just the basic. I would pass the basic plus the extra. I almost always have more than 80%. The problem is well, an examiner want me to be there if I didn't have the full class, the full knowledge that they are actually sending out. Then at the same time, I have some knowledge, but I'm sure that a class explaining stuff would probably help me learn even more. learn on some aspects that I might not really know much. So I don't know, you know. Matt says has been trying to learn Morse code, even though it's not required. It's tricky to listen. It's, you know, it's like a language. It's like a language. Matt says, obviously I don't know what questions they ask in Canada, but I would bet that Joe could pass the USA technician and general exams without any additional study or even practice exams. You know, I guess, you know, I've had a lot of knowledge, and I mean, a lot of the knowledge I have is from listening and from watching and reading. So, you know. I mean, I'm not really good in Morse code, but you guys saw yesterday I was listening to the AA station, and I could kind of make it out. But of course, it's more complicated than that. You got to really, really be capable of listening, and you know. And honestly, CW requirement or not, I've always been interested in kind of listening in and trying to decode the CW by ear. One, because computers are so bad at decoding Morse code sent by humans because it's not well shifted in time. But also because it's kind of cool. You just sit down and it's like, oh, that's a station from that country, you know? I see these pileups sometimes in Morse code and think, oh man, this, I'd like to go there and, like, you know, be able to identify with just by listening, identify that station, you know? PageMaster says, took CW test back in 1996. The VC gave me the wrong speed code. Instead of 5, it was 20 words per minute, but I missed the test by 1 character. Whoa, there is a big difference between 5 and 20 words per minute, though. And if you miss by 1 character at 20 words per minute, man, you should have had your license. Can tell you that. Can tell you that. Radioactive says you could pass an extra class for Canada. Wow, walk in a noob and become an extra class. That would be like, you know, well, that guy didn't follow the course, and everybody's like, yeah, he thinks he's gonna know everything, and he come out and it's like, yeah, I got my extra class now. Oh man. Tom McManus says, yes, all licenses here have no Morse code, but really, if people get a license, just maybe a few will be able to practice live more. I think some have mind for code, some never will. It's like a language. Morse code is a language. It's if you have an ability to learn languages, you'll learn Morse code. If for you learning another language is difficult, Morse code will be difficult also. It's really the same thing as listening or learning a language, honestly. Matt says, I didn't take a class for technician. I'm self-studying for general now and think I'll be fine when time comes. I plan to do it before they change the question pool in June. So interesting. The SAS says 161.975.162.025. There you can receive the AIS broadcast in the near of port. I don't know if that is international. I don't know exactly what you mean by AIS, but here we have, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's pretty much what you mean. For example, here in the maritime stuff, if I go on 161.850 or 161.650, so this is maritime conditions for the St. Lawrence Seaway.
Waypoint Delta 5000 north, 0661 west, Then, waypoint echo. 5007.
It's interesting. They changed the voices. More of a computerized voice now.
4950 north, 06110 west. Then, waypoint got.
So 161, 650, 161, 850 are the frequencies I hear here. This is the St. Lawrence Seaway kind of conditions and all the warnings for navigation and stuff. Get it here, this SAS. Bill W3 WDR says I prepped at home, took practice exam online, and showed up at a testing session. So I'd like to, you know. Bullfrog says my ears can distinguish the dots and dashes. It all sounds the same unless it's incredibly slow. You know, like yesterday, the guy was sending pretty fast. I don't know what his speed was, but I was still capable of discerning pretty much the letters and the numbers. When I said it's AA3B, so, you know, I guess. Well, that is interesting. You know what, Radioactive? That could be interesting to post a few videos of the Canadian test questions. Absolutely, that would be interesting. I'm sure it would also help a lot some future hams maybe that would be just looking at, you know, what we're talking about and all here. So yeah, that could be that would be nice. Live shows. Maybe next one of the live shows we're gonna do. You know what? That could be nice. I'll be sending you guys some of the test questions we have in Canada and see who is right or wrong on that. That could be a lot of fun, actually. David says I passed just with the knowledge I already had in practice tests on the Spanish Ham Radio Association website. 2 tests, radioelectricity and legislation. And you know what helps me a lot, I gotta say, what helps me a lot is the fact that I have a lot of electricity and electronics knowledge that I already had before because of the courses I took in college. So I already have a lot of the electronic stuff without any problem. I actually probably know more about electronic stuff than you know, the majority of hams that get their license. So, you know. Matt says there are people who take all 3 tests in one sitting and pass, but they're pretty rare. But it's very common for people to test for technician in general and pass both. Radioactive says, yes, I read that. Eddie Essex says, write the test. Do you know bandwidth by frequency, phonetic alphabet, Q code, resistor colors, series, parallel circuits? You're halfway there. Yeah, like I said, I got a lot of knowledge of electronics already. Because I had electronics course in college, and my electronic course in college is much more advanced than what ham radio operators tests ask in questions. So, you know. Yeah, Candy Clover, nice to have you here. Extra channels on some NOAA radios, not all, but some NOAA radios have them. The Canadian Maritime, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Man. So, what's that? I've got a 7. Oh, man. I'm trying to check the, for some reason, Morse code that is like in text form doesn't, I'm not as fast, you know. radioactive NOAA weather broadcast on 162.500 in his area. Now here I will listen to, and one of my beacons actually is 162.400, which is the Burlington, Vermont weather.
The official National Weather Service forecast for the Champlain Valley, which includes Burlington, Middlebury, St. Albans, and Plattsburgh. Tonight, partly cloudy until midnight, then cloudy with snow and sleet likely after midnight. Snow and
I always refer to that because that is, for me, knowing if a receiver is good or not, honestly. You know what, Candy Clover? I was listening to, he says that lots of hams don't know any electronic stuff. I was listening to 2-meter repeater a couple of months back and listening to two guys talking. And I was kind of little surprised at how basic their knowledge of not just electronics, but radio theory in general was. I was listening to them and I was like, whoa. And you're a ham radio operator? So, you know, sometimes you look at that and you're like, what the hell is that? Take care, Radioactive. It was nice to have you here. See you next week, Friday, 2000 hours UTC. So, you know. And if you want to test on the shortwave band, what is cool is W1AW. They have different speed CW every night, which is kind of nice. I remember I listened sometimes to their slow speed, you know, 5 words per minute, and trying to decode as much as I could. But I am amazed when I listen to especially when I listen to 2 meters, and I mean even on the shortwave bands, but when I listen to 2 meters repeaters and people start talking about electronics or radio, of course my ear just buzzes. It's like, okay, I gotta listen in. I gotta, you know, well, follow these guys. They're talking about something, you know. And I am amazed at how basic the knowledge is for most of these guys out there. And I'm like, wow, with such low level knowledge, you're an amateur radio operator. You know, it's something that makes you wonder. But at the same time, you can't put it too difficult, honestly, because if you put it too difficult, well, there's not going to be any hams out there. You know, I mean, it has to, you know, vary basically. And if you put it too difficult, a lot of hams won't be there. I'm going to tell you that. So, you know. Gordon Threadwell, nice to have you here. VE6 GPT. Used to listen to ham radio before becoming one, and heard years ago the opening of Euro Disney in Expedition in Iceland. Cool. You know, it's just, I think you gotta, it's just something that sometimes you're like, wow. Yeah, Elton Byington, exactly. Memorize the test questions. You know, honestly, the questions are multiple. Everybody knows multiple choice questions are easier to pass in general if you have just a minimum of logic than explaining yourself, you know, in some way. And I don't know, for a lot of them I think that's pretty much it. They just learned, they memorized the questions and answers, and that's it. And which is sad, because I do hear hams talking again, I can tell you that. A lot of them are you know, I don't want to say that I'm necessarily better, but when I see and when I look at what I do here with the shortwave channel and the VHF UHF channel, I'm not even a ham operator. I kind of understand that my knowledge of radio and electronics and all of that is way better than so many ham operators out there. I don't know. They should just give me the license and that's it. No, of course, it's better to pass a test. But I mean, I look at that and I'm personally surprised. I'm like, wow, I know so much compared to, that VE station that just talked about bull or something, Max S. Strong says, sometimes I drool into the mic and cause perks. Oh man, Page Master has a marine radio operator permit. Cool. It's just crazy. Oh man. Doug McManus says, most people just cram for an amateur test. Many do not really know much real electronics, but they got a license. So if you can memorize the questions, you got, I guess, And I understand that also, like Radiocom says, majority of people just want to operate radio but not be electronics engineers. You're right on that, honestly. You're totally right on that. And I think we got to give the chance to everybody. I mean, the basic license is a basic license. Maybe I'm the guy that's just asking a little too much out of maybe what knowledge you should have for a basic amateur license. It's just that, I don't know, for me, amateur radio has some kind of, for me, it's some kind of, it's some hobby that has and requires some minimum of knowledge that I don't see a lot. VE3KRP says real hams do CW and drink beer. I'll have to. So in your next test, you'll have to drink 3 Fins of Own beer at 9% and decode 30 words per minute CW perfectly. If you do that, you've got the highest license in the world. Oh man. And I'm pretty sure that like everything in life, the more beer you drink, the less your capability of listening to CW and decoding is going to be good. Oh, man. Max S. Strong says, ham radio is cool. There will always be few amateurs around, no matter what generation. Oh, absolutely. 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 Oh, man. Yeah, like Bill says, W3 WDR. It's good to know the difference between a diode and capacitor. Absolutely. At least a minimum. At least a minimum. Hey, Elizabeth. Nice to have you here. Kenny Clover says, given the freedom you get on a ham radio, at least with FCC tech, you get a lot of freedom and you don't need type approval of radios. So having some knowledge is important so you don't mess anything up. Tom McManus. Haha, if you can CW 30 words per minute and be drunk, give the person a license. Yeah, why not, Tom? Oh, God. I actually know somebody that probably could have done it a long time ago. Radiocom says, I know the basics and that gets me by, but I still managed to get my QRZ certificate for working all continents in Umbro antennas. Cool. That is nice. That is nice. Well, there'll be one more this year. I'm going to be there at Garden Treadwell as a ham radio operator for sure. You can buy police scanners everywhere. Join the movement. Oh man, I can tell you that. So hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the show. We are at 2 hours and 20, but I'll have to quickly finish my beer, dress up beautiful, and meet some of my friends downtown a little later. So I'm sorry to cut it a little short. I hope you all enjoyed today's show, and it was kind of interesting today. I really enjoyed the fact that we talked about those biofangs and those, all the regulations around everything. It was kind of an interesting aspect of the hobby today for the VHF UHF show, and hope you guys enjoyed the show. Only got that last. Thanks everybody for being here. Hope you enjoyed. Next show, shortwave show, Friday, March the 1st. March the 1st. So it's pretty crazy. March the 1st. And we are going to be live for the shortwave show. Hope you enjoy, guys. Take care, my friends. And I will get my ham license, I promise. It's this year, it's happening. I'll actually be looking into that this week. So take care, my friends. My pleasure, David Arden. You know what? It's always nice to have you here. Pretty cool to have everybody on board. Thanks, guys, for being here. Thanks for being great fans. Hope you enjoyed. And see you Friday, March 1st. Thanks for those that donate. And enjoy your weekend. Enjoy your amateur radio stuff. Enjoy listening to your scanner radios. Find new signals this weekend. Take that scanner out and start tuning the bands. VHF, UHF, and all of it. You will be surprised what you can hear. Take care, guys. Love you all. Stay safe. Bye-bye.